Hello and welcome to Adventures in AI, where the Insight Flow team members share things that have caught our attention over the past week and talk about our own experiences in the world of AI. I'm Giles.
I'm Rich.
And I'm Graham. And this week we're going to talk about a specific aspect of AI in recruitment. Now, recruitment's a particularly interesting subject in all sorts of ways when you're talking about technology, partly because it's been changed more by technology in the last 20 years than just about any other part of routine business, I suspect. It's become a very, very technology-driven part of business. I think that the second reason it's worth talking about recruitment is that it's something that everybody who works and every company has to deal with at some point in their lives. And as we are looking forward to how AI is impacting us, I think recruitment is an area where it's definitely going to impact and going to have a huge effect. The other area of recruitment is that they've already used stuff that kind of looks like AI. I remember about 15, 20 years ago using a very brilliant company called Burning Glass when I was running a jobs board, who were using big data to look at CVs and to compare CVs and to produce pools of information and common definition. And as I say, that was 15, 20 years ago. And it's kind of actually, if you look back on it, it looks quite a lot like some of the AI stuff today. So what we're going to do in this podcast is work through the various stages of the recruitment process and look at how AI is already able to help, if that's true, but also to talk about what people in business might be looking to do to use AI to help them out a little bit better. The first part of that process then is that, and actually looking back on that Burning Glass thing, one of the things that they did brilliantly was understand workforces and understand the common parts of job descriptions, either within a company or within a sector or within a type of worker. And I think that is something that AI has the potential to really help on. The idea that you can look at everybody's job description, everybody's CV, and to look at all the people who are doing similar jobs and to look at their CVs and where they've come from and what they've been, and start to really, really understand and drive and define the people who already work for you, which of course helps understand what the people you want to work for you look like.
I think this idea of a kind of a skills gap analysis of your workforce is actually a really important one. And if I'm thinking historically how it's worked in the past with companies that I've been involved with, you kind of say, so let's say a consultancy company, you realize that you've got more clients than usual, and that's kind of an ongoing trend. So you decide, okay, I need to hire another consultant. And somebody just copy and paste the consultant role job description that you've used for the past like 3 or 4 years, and it goes off into the market. But actually with AI and and allowing you to analyze it in a lot greater detail what you're doing, you can identify, for example, okay, actually, what industries am I starting to work in? And do the people that I have working for me currently have that expertise in that area, or do I need to specifically look for that? And kind of further down the line as well, if you have integrated AI processes into your workflow, what you can actually do is you can look at your, I guess, AI interaction history, how your employees are interacting with AI, to get an idea of kind of actually what they're doing day to day. And then you can use that to help you build your job descriptions and see where people are struggling that you'd potentially need kind of to recruit to gain specific skills.
So I think the question I have about that is because I think that's happening already in quite a few organizations. So using the data they have in HR systems for workforce planning and all of that kind of thing. I think So my general observation would be that sort of thing works really well if you've got quite well-defined roles within your organization, and less so in more fluid organizations where it's more about, if you like, capabilities than skills. So where you have people, what you need from the people in that organization is the ability to almost fill in the gaps and think for themselves and do all that sort of thing. So I think that's where the kind of thing you're talking about potentially starts to fall down, because those are much harder to write as job descriptions, and it's more about, you know, attitude and aptitude than it is about skill or experience. Now, that said, I think certainly in larger organizations, when they have a fairly clear and fairly well set understanding of what their workforce needs to look like, it makes a lot of sense and can be massively helpful. I think then the follow on for me is, so what does generative AI contribute towards that wasn't already there from some of the systems, some of the, if you like, the specifically trained AI, like the one Burning Glass that Graham was talking about earlier. And I think potentially it democratizes it, although I would say the jury's out. So I could throw a CV, well, actually, I could throw a CV at ChatGPT and ask it to spit out a job description that matches the CV, which is obviously brilliant if it's your CV and you're applying for the job. But or I could do it the other way around and say, okay, show me a matching CV for this, and then essentially use that kind of, if you like, the archetypical CV that comes from a job description to match against the CVs that you want to come in, and, you know, effectively say, score this CV based on the archetypical one. That's effectively what a lot of the systems already do, I think. And so you're not gaining a huge amount over and above the systems that are already there, other than, you know, my guess is it'll lower the cost of a lot of these systems because you can do it cheaper because it's a more generic model. So you don't have the training costs that are associated, or you can spread the training costs that are associated with that model across a bunch of different organizations of different types. So I think, you know, I think it has value. I think the systems already exist. Quite a lot of organizations are already using them. What I think is new is possibly just the ease with which it's possible to do this stuff.
I think it's potentially worth pointing out as well, and Graham, you might be able to fill us in a little bit more on the software that you used. It's just, I guess, how the incumbent software is analyzing those CVs or kind of that information. And my assumption is that it's probably from a big data point of view, doing things like, has that person got a 2-1? What university did they go to? But if you think about what actually AI can do now in terms of more qualitative analysis of what's being written, I think although it's doing kind of the same process, I think you can extract a lot more information from that CV that you potentially wouldn't have been able to do previously.
That's really interesting, because on that one in particular, one of the things that Burning Glass were able to do was to normalize the data across various sections of a CV and across various CVs, and to recognize that, you know, if you had a certain type of experience in one job and then had similar experience in another job 2 or 3 years later, that they could identify that you had the combined total of experience, and that they were analyzing semantically multiple terms for effectively the same thing and normalizing that information, which I think, as I understand it, is something that AI can do extremely well. I think the part in that particular one that AI might not be able to do is to do the sums, to say there's 3 years here and there's 3 years there, and therefore it's 6 years total experience of this type.
Yeah, that part I think is coming. I suppose one of the questions I would have is a job description and a CV the right format to use in a post AI world? So you know, if I look at what other information I can get on somebody, obviously things like LinkedIn profile, which is effectively a CV anyway. What else can I get about them? I can get, you know, tweets and other things. So if I'm able to say, if as an HR hiring manager or just a hiring manager within the department, I'm able to say, give me all of the candidates who are good at this, this, and this, or I need to fill my team with somebody like this. Is a job description and a CV still the best way of defining and evaluating a person?
That's been a conversation in the recruitment industry for a very long time. And as yet, there has been no really satisfactory alternatives to the here is a document that defines my combined skills and experience, and here is a document that lays out what we as an organization want. I mean, I think AI is more likely to offer different versions, and I think that one of the interesting aspects to it is the idea that says that AI around that understanding workforce and creating job descriptions piece can actually start to go, well, actually, the skill and experience are useful to know, but what's really important is, can this person deliver the outcomes that we want for the business? And what sort of person can deliver the outcomes we want for the business? And I think that becomes a really interesting conversation. I mean, it's not, I think, for the short term, because the whole recruitment industry is so wedded to the idea of job description and CV. And yeah, Burning Glass actually made it the same thing. So, you know, as you were sort of suggesting earlier, Giles, what Burning Glass did was to say, we'll take the job description and we'll turn it into the perfect CV, and then score every other CV against that perfect CV. So their tool actually compared CV to CV. But the idea of, is CV good enough or complete enough or even accurate enough to deliver, to be able to see that you can deliver outcomes for an organization, is a very good one.
I think it's worth remembering as well that the AI thrives when given information. And if we're thinking of kind of a CV in silo, that's just one piece of information. And I think the point is now that because we have all these time-saving tools, we can go out and actually find lots more sources of information that we can put in and around that CV. So I think if you were to ask me what's the one most important document, I'd say the CV, but I'd say don't just be using the CV because there's plenty more sources of information that you can go out to now easily and doesn't have to be done by a human.
Yeah, I think one of there's a more negative side of it as well, where you could argue that increasingly there's an arms race between hiring teams trying to protect themselves from a load of CV, rubbish, and people using AI to write their CVs in such a way that they get hired for the job. So if the interesting effect that I think AI is going to have within that dynamic is, I can very quickly write my CV based on a job description. So I can get an AI to generate a CV based on the job description that I'm interested in applying for. So I can have a whole load of different CVs out that help me get through the first stage of the hiring process. Now, it doesn't necessarily help me get the job, but it certainly helps me get through that first stage of the hiring process. And I think that's where AI will both help and hinder the process, because actually it's going to make it harder and harder to differentiate between people, because they're all going to be using the same tools to generate their CVs. And yes, obviously they shouldn't lie on their CV. And so part of what they'll need to do is to say, okay, take my existing kind of CV of everything and summarize it for this job, is probably a better kind of workflow for somebody to do. Now, and in that scenario, it's incredibly helpful for the candidate, because it means they can give their best to every job that they're applying to without actually having to put in all the time and effort that currently is involved in tailoring a CV for every job that you go for.
So, but that's an interesting one, Giles, because in prep for this, doing this podcast, I actually tried to get AI CV writers to do exactly that. Here's me in my LinkedIn profile, my CV, etc., and here's the job that hypothetically I'm applying to. Now rewrite the CV to match the job, and it was terrible. And both Bard and Chat were awful at that, and they kind of completely missed really important nuance.
Which does therefore suggest that it's a more specialist kind of thing. It's a more specialist AI.
And actually, with what we're talking about in terms of using AI to analyze CVs as well, you're getting to this potential point where AI is grading AI written documents, which I say
Well, no,
slightly ingest.
We're going to get on to that bit later on, because that's a later part of the process. I mean, at the moment, we're just talking about this idea that says that we can use AI to understand our workforces, and from that, we can use AI to create job descriptions. Now, they may not be brilliant, but at least we can create them quickly and then edit them quickly. And I think that is quite a powerful thing. I mean, I know that creating good job descriptions is somewhat tedious and it's quite a painful part of the process. And I like the idea that you could use AI to get, for instance, various people's ideas about what the job should deliver, and combine those, use the AI to combine that information into a more complete or perhaps even more nuanced job description. And I think that is possible. I feel from what I've seen and the way that it's working at the moment, that is possible. The idea that says we'll effectively create a knowledge base about this job and use the AI to create a summary of that in a job description format would feel to me to be completely possible today, and probably adds quite a lot of value to an organization.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think, certainly in my experience, the process of creating job descriptions is one that while it probably doesn't take a lot of time from individuals, it always gets pushed down the list. And so quite often so it's not so much, it wouldn't be a huge time saver, but what you would save a huge amount on is how long does it take from when you first start thinking about hiring for a position to being ready to hire for it. And I think that in itself makes a huge difference. And yeah, I do agree. I think it's eminently capable of that. It's almost, if you think of it as the collaborative editing process for a job description and getting the AI to do the marshalling part in the middle, that for me feels like it was a high value thing, because it would actually speed up that process dramatically.
Excellent. So we move on to the next part of the recruitment process. We have a job description written, and the next part of that is choosing where to advertise the job and to whom to advertise it. Now, I think this is really interesting because again, Giles, you've already talked about the fact that there are recruitment platforms that do a lot of things in very, very sophisticated ways, and I know that in this particular area there are management tools, Broadbean and a variety of others, that allow you to advertise your job simply, that you put it into one place and they distribute it out to the appropriate job boards and channels and so forth. And increasingly, email and SMS tools become part of that process. So again, I'm not sure if AI helps particularly at the moment in making the selections about where the job gets advertised. What it can possibly do is to make sure that the format of the job advertisement suits the media, that we can say, here's a job description, now change that for SMS, change that for social, change that for a job advertisement on this site and a job advertisement on that site, that require slightly different formatting things.
Yeah, I think there's two questions I would have immediately. One is, what's advertising going to look like in a post-AI world? So if you think about Google, Bing, you think about the AI enabled versions of those, where instead of pointing you to the site with the answer, they just give you the answer and reference where it came from. Then that will transform advertising. So one way of potentially thinking about what the existing job boards and things will become is a similar kind of thing where you go, I need somebody who can fulfill these requirements. And so it becomes more of a candidate pool than a job board, and almost flips around the other way, if you like. So I think at that point, does the data that you need look the same? Quite possibly, actually. So, it may be that, and certainly I would say in the short term, the job boards that exist at the moment will probably just make the data available to an AI that allows them, they'll kind of put an AI on the front end and do a Q&A sort of type system where it goes, right, find me all of the candidates that are suitable for this job. So I think possibly that doesn't change very much. And at that point, speeding up the process of getting the advertising in the right format for those platforms possibly is going to be useful. Although actually, if the platforms are smart, what they'll do is say, just upload your job spec and we'll analyze it and we'll give you a list of potential candidates.
But that's something they already do. And they're doing it through increasingly sophisticated search tools. And, well, when I say increasingly sophisticated, sometimes not at all sophisticated, in that they hang on any kind of match whatsoever, which leads to the fact that I mentioned that I speak German a little bit, getting me offers of German speaking project managers in Austria. It's kind of, okay, there is a match, but it's a fairly trivial match.
Yeah, and I think that one of the big shifts that you're likely to see is the shift from keyword based, or in technical terms, the BM25 based search, where you've predefined which keywords you're looking for and are searching against that, to more of a semantic or probably mixed one. So in some cases, so if you've got a job description that says, I need skill X, skill Y, skill Z, then you'll probably want to have skills actually listed as keywords that you want to search against. But what you might want to do is more of a semantic search against things like characteristics, against interests, against the sorts of things where they're much more generally worded, and you can't be it's not. So one of the big issues I think at the moment with the industry is matching on keywords means you can miss some really good candidates and you get some who just know how to match the keywords. And that's actually a problem if you're not getting the ones that have the right skills and have the right experience, but they're just expressing it in a different way, possibly because they've worked in a different industry, or because they use language in a different way, but that doesn't mean they don't have the skills. And so I think that's where I could see it's almost a side effect of AI as things shift towards semantic search rather than keyword search. That itself will change the way the industry operates, I think.
we'll move to it'll be a more passive candidate recruitment model. Like we all know nowadays, we get recruiters coming out LinkedIn inbox, even though we haven't applied for any jobs or anything. But I think that will potentially happen a lot more often, because if you think of the available talent pool, it's not that recruiters and companies that are hiring won't just want to limit that to people that have applied for the job. Now that we've got the tools to go out to social media, you've got Discord bots. You can see who's talking about maybe technical things that are relevant to your organization. Reddit scrapers. There's a lot more of an ability now for you to go out to candidates, or I say you, like if you're using a recruitment company, for them to do that for you and go out to people. And I think if we're asking the question of, does that then make it harder for you to decide who, like, where to target and who to go out to. I don't think so necessarily, because if you're going through a recruitment company, you're providing them with the details of who they need for the job, and actually, I in terms of the talent pool that they have access to, that will be growing and kind of being made broader anyway due to all of these tools. And I think because you're expanding the talent pool, that actually allows you to be a lot more picky in kind of precision of who's right for the job for you. So before, if you did a kind of really specialized job description, tailored it kind of down to every single bullet point, that might mean you don't get many people responding to your job, even though those one or two people might be really good for your job. But because you've got a much bigger talent pool now that you can access, and arguably can access easily, and you can translate between different pools as well, so say social media, Discord, in terms of what would come across better, and AI can do that for you. So I think the AI actually handles the precision for you as to how to respond and how to contact people.
There's a really interesting point there, because recruitment advertising, unlike normal advertising, doesn't have volume of response as a success metric. In its most perfect sense, you could suggest that perfect recruitment advertising hits one person who is just perfect for the job from the very first moment you set eyes on them, and that's it. Now, human nature being human nature is, and we still want to have some human agency in it and some sense of choice. Perfect in human terms, recruitment advertising probably throws up between 4 and 8 perfect candidates or great candidates, and allows you to choose between the 4 best of them or whatever it is. But it's something like that. But recruitment advertising is actually a slightly odd beast in that, unlike the rest of advertising, which talks about impact and footfall and hit and eyeballs and all the other things, perfect recruitment advertising doesn't have volume as its counter. The other thing you said there, Rich, I think is really, really important when we're looking at how AI is going to change recruitment, and actually how AI can be changed in different ways already. Sorry, how AI can change your use, how you recruit in ways already. I think the really important thing that you said there is this idea that you can go out and look at other data, that you can go and look at Discord and social and Reddit and I think the idea that you can be capturing what people are saying about your sector, your industry, or about their work and how they work, and include that in your selection process. I think that is really important, and I think it is possible right now to do that. And I think it's something that businesses should really be looking at, because this idea that says advertising is the only route to market, it's not embedded in the recruitment industry. They do try all sorts of other direct approaches, and as I was talking earlier, email and SMS are very important tools for recruitment organizations. But the idea that says that we can go and find people because of the amount of information about people that's findable in online and in open source areas is incredibly important. And I think that one of the things that we look at there is that AI already allows us to make better use of existing talent pools, whether it's talent pools that we've developed ourselves, or everybody who's ever replied to us, or anybody who we've ever worked with. And there's no reason to say that an organization shouldn't start capturing the details of great people they've worked with to make that available to a future talent pool. And it's really, again, really interesting. If you start to look online, you can see this happening, that there are multiple organizations who are inviting people to join their talent pool, to send in their CV, to send in their information, not for a specific job, but join the talent pool. Let us become aware of you. So I think there's some really interesting stuff around that with AI.
So I think on that one specifically, actually, there's some interesting mechanisms that they're using for that as well. So, and this, comes back to what does the world beyond the CV look like? So one of the things that a lot of graduate schemes are doing is, as part of the recruitment process, and in some cases this is sort of within a specific part of the process, is it's kind of like a presentation stage, but it's done automatically, if you like. So what happens is you're recording a video within a limited period of time, and you're given a question and you have to answer the question. I suppose it's a less technical version of the developer coding test, but essentially that kind of thing where you can get an AI to analyze and the transcript of whatever that person has recorded, and use that as part of the selection process, I think again is quite interesting. And while 3-4 years ago that was really expensive to do, that's now quite affordable. So I think those sorts of things where it's kind of tell me about yourself in your own words, and almost the first interview potentially disappears because you don't need it anymore, because you've got that person talking about themselves in their own words. Possibly an AI interview or a set of whatever the interview questions that the hiring manager would do normally can be done automatically. Now, I think my only issue with that as an approach is that it fails to understand the kind of chemistry aspect of hiring. But it certainly makes for a fairer process. So, there's always going to be a balance between chemistry and fairness, I would say.
I think so. And in that, you're talking about the first interview, and for the most part, the first interaction, whether it's a telephone interview or a chat or what have you, is as much as anything else, is one of my ex-colleagues rather spectacularly put it, was we've got to make sure that they don't smell and that they look people in the eye. This is sort of the anti-chemistry test, I suspect.
Yep. Yes, it's this sniff test.
But I think what we're hearing here, and I do actually very much believe this, is that technology has changed recruiting, but recruiting has said for a very long time that the next big change is about to come. And it does feel, particularly in this idea of the change of importance of talent pools, of the change of importance of the information that's in a CV against the information about a person that's anywhere else or can be generated anywhere else, whether it's this is about me video or whatever, means that access through AI to a much broader set of information fundamentally does question the CV job description connection. And we've talked about that, and I think does start to really change the relationship between employer and candidate. I mean, it's interesting to note that actually employer candidate branding is incredibly important. Candidates that have a bad experience with an employer are something like 20 times more likely to be rude about that employer in future than customers who've had a bad experience. So there is something quite important to that. But I do think that there's a really interesting thing that AIs can already do that changes how organizations get to the stage of inviting applications and how they do that.
For me, I think that relationship between the candidates and the employers, it's improved by AI because it enables personalization at scale. So I think there's a better understanding and alignment between the candidate and the company. And so firstly, we've talked a lot about, obviously you've got improved screening. So you're more sure that the person that you're coming in to speak to is more right for the role. But I think traditionally, both interviewers and interviewees go into meetings more unprepared than they should be. And I don't think that's necessarily because of a lack of time preparing. I think it's due to a lack of information. And so, for example, if you're preparing for an interview, you can go on your company website, but then all the information they might publish is like a year out of date. Or if you're going in there as the interviewer, you're looking at the CV, and that's the same generic one that's kind of gone out to 50 other companies. So it's a lot harder to start to get that conversation going in the right areas. But what we're saying with AI, you're increasing the talent pool, you're increasing the amount of information that both parties have so that they can prepare. And that enables you to then go on a more personalized candidate journey. So you can have kind of customized interview questions that are specific to each individual candidate. You could simulate job scenarios specific to the candidate. And you can tailor the interview process down to things like, oh, this person knows Python, for example, but that wasn't in the job description. But then you might think, oh, but maybe we could use that. So we need to make sure kind of Bob's in the interview into the interview process because he's the other person that uses a bit of Python. Or you could go down the like kind of the personality fit route as well. You've got more information about what kind of person that candidate is, and you think, oh, that's probably a good match for Sally's team. Let's make sure that she's on the interview team as well. So it's a lot more personal process, and you get a lot more information out of that process as well from both parties.
So is it like dating? So I mean, the hiring process has always been like dating, but if you think about how dating has changed over the last 20 years, it used to be you'd go meet somebody, you'd know nothing about them, and you know the date was finding out about them. Whereas nowadays, you only go on the date once you found out about them. So you kind of look them up online, you know everything about them, and then the date is actually the sniff test, arguably. So you kind of the whole thing's been flipped around, and or maybe you used to do all of it in one go, whereas now you kind of split it up into two things. And you discover that the person that you're going on a date with doesn't look like you thought they did, or they're a foot shorter than you thought they were, or whatever else. I hasten to add, just in case my wife's listening, this is not from personal experience. I just heard something on the radio about this. Anyway, moving on. But I think I suppose my question then is, what does that mean for that personalization? Because actually, if all parties kind of know and have had a chance to vet all of the things about the person, then does the hiring process become a hell of a lot more efficient? Because actually it really is just the sniff test, while maintaining that kind of decent candidate experience. Or does it enable other things to happen in the hiring process that means you're likely to get a better fit, better outcome, a longer term relationship, and a better sort of long term, what's the word, loyalty from that person coming into the organization, or even if they're unsuccessful, actually, that they still feel like they've had a decent experience.
Wouldn't it be great if the job hunt process was boiled down to just swipe right, swipe left, and you just get a bunch of companies come up?
Well, don't joke. I mean, in some organisations, it pretty much is. So, sorry, there's one other thing that I think was interesting that you were talking about earlier, Graham, is this idea of, if you've got lots of different data sources, what does that actually mean? And I think where that just struck a chord for me in terms of the work that we're doing around building AI, the knowledge base is a core part of what you need to have in place in order for an AI to be useful. And so you can start to think of, instead in the traditional world, the CV is the knowledge base. That's kind of everything you've got about that person. If you've got a whole load of different things, files, documents, etc., and you can make them available to an AI, then that it kind of almost changes the architecture of the way that you need to build systems to support this stuff. So from a kind of engineering perspective, if the systems are all built to just support a CV, they're going to struggle. If they're built to support CV, loads of supporting information, pulling stuff in from here, there, and everywhere, then actually they're going to really thrive in an AI, like a generative AI world, because they can make that stuff available to the Gen AI and therefore help in personalizing the process.
So I think what we've heard in that bit is that, and to pull in Rich's comment from earlier, the risk is that we will have AIs judging CVs written by AIs, and I suspect that's already happening. I know that's already happening with the ubiquity of both CV writers and AI in that initial selection process. But I do think that AI will help the process of handling and understanding applications. It can already, if well set up, can already help that process out. And there's actually, it occurs to me, there's another area within that that's actually quite an important one. I remember when I was again running another jobs board or recruitment process, talking to a potential client in a bank, and she was head of HR in a bank, or head of recruitment in a bank, and they had been told to stop using recruitment consultancies because of cost. They were told to start to go direct, and the first ad is a very, very well-known bank brand, and the first ad she put out got 970 applications, and because it's a bank, the sort of the idea of doing everything properly and dotting the I's and crossing the T's meant that she had to say no to 910 people or whatever it was, and give reasons why she was saying no. And that, in the end, took her and her team far longer than the money saved the recruitment agency. And it feels to me that and back to this idea of the candidate experience, that one area that we should absolutely look at AI helping is not just the accepting the good CVs and passing, or the good applicants, we should say, given what we've been talking about, and passing them through into the next stage of the process, but also personalizing the negative responses and explaining why that person is not moving to the next stage. And I think that's actually that is something that the recruitment industry really needs at the moment. And it feels to me, from what you're saying and from what I've seen, that it's something that AI can deliver today, let alone is something that it might be able to do in the future.
Yeah, I think there's two interesting things, and I completely agree. I think one of the things is, so if you use AI if you ask AI a question that says, tell me why I shouldn't hire this person, and those are the reasons that you send in your, I suppose the point is, it depends on how you prompt the AI. So it's very easy to say, give me a list of reasons why I shouldn't hire this person for this position. And that gives you the opportunity to do the here's some good things about what you've said, by saying, give me the reasons why I should hire this person, give me the reasons why I shouldn't hire them. The only issue I would say with that is that the AI doesn't necessarily, or you have to make sure it properly understands the criteria against which you're hiring, and it's always relative. So again, there's almost a statistical element to it. If you want to kind of make it a really solid feedback system, then you have to actually have quite a solid process and a set of metrics that you're measuring against. And I think that's where certainly generative AI would struggle a bit, because it's less quantitative than that. So again, I think that might be one where, if all you want to do is do a kind of personalized response, then I think it's very good. If what you want to do is actually provide genuinely constructive feedback as to why the person didn't get the job. And it, to take your banking example, they wouldn't accept anything that was just tell me the reasons why this person hasn't succeeded, because it just wouldn't work. Then I think you have to start looking at more specialist solutions for that feedback.
But those are specialist solutions that you can conceive of being built. I mean, we're talking about stuff that is possible now, even if it's not currently actually made.
Yeah, I think my question really is generative AI the whole solution? I think the answer is no. Is generative AI part of the solution? Almost certainly. Are there other either AI or actually just normal traditional kind of computing systems that would enable you to do the other part? So how do I score, everything against each other? Is that a generative AI thing, or is that actually a separate scoring system that may exist already? And all I'm doing is getting generative AI to create the description off the back of that, the statistics that are provided. So, I could imagine an immediate win would be, well, I've got a set of statistics against a particular CV that from my existing evaluation system, and and then I've got the successful candidate statistics, and AI can write me the description for that candidate that says you're weaker here and weaker there, and here are the areas where you're strong. Okay, and a little bit and make that more tailored to their individual CV. So I could see AI doing that pretty quickly. Where I think it would struggle is doing that analysis to get those numbers in the first place.
I think kind of a slightly tangential point about using AI to parse CVs, but one worth mentioning is I think you're reducing the burden on the candidates as well, because I think we've all been through job application processes where you not only have to upload your CV, it's like a huge form process that you have to go through. It can take half an hour to go through. If you've reduced that to upload your CV, because we know the AI is going to analyze it and extract all the information, put your Twitter handle, your LinkedIn, I don't know, your Reddit username, and that's a 5-minute process, then you're going to attract a lot more potential candidates there. And we've talked before about expanding the talent pool. Because of your AI parsing abilities, you've made it much easier for candidates to apply.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So we move into the end part of recruitment there. And again, there's a couple of areas I think where AI helps. Some of it's a big help and some of it is just slightly trivial, but still can help. So the idea that AIs can pick up the messaging around the scheduling of interviews and as people move through the process of picking up. And again, to your point that you've just made, Giles, that there are already systems that do stuff that looks pretty much like that. Breezy HR, I know, certainly does that thing. As you move somebody into the next stage, it triggers all the emails and the appointment booking and what have you. So it's not necessarily an AI tool that's doing this at that stage. I mean, I think there's an interesting bit there that says that AI may be being used to analyze the good and bad of what's happening and to reword the job description and to do a further reach out and to learn from what's happened through the process. I think that there is a possibility around that, and that is of relatively trivial use. Okay, then the final area, and I think it is one that's really worth thinking about in the recruitment process, is the idea that in the first instance, and the two last stages, the element of handling the contracts and getting that all sorted out, and also managing the initial onboarding. The sort of final part of the recruitment process is to bring them successfully into the organisation. And I think that in both of those, we see real possibility for current AI to add a huge amount. Either whether that's taking weight off the human workforce, or actually just doing things more quickly and more accurately.
Yeah, and I think that the piece about contracts, because there is usually a bit of toing and froing. I think organisations with the right systems actually have a relatively slick process around this. I think the part that is often missed, and a lot of it actually does depend on things like how senior the person is, and therefore how much negotiating power they have over their contract. Because obviously, in some roles, you have zero power; it's just you accept it or you don't. Whereas in other roles, it's a negotiation. But I think the initial onboarding piece for me is where there's a huge opportunity to really transform how quickly someone gets up to full kind of operating power, if you like, within an organization. And certainly in my experience, that onboarding part is a combination of orientation, knowledge, and a network. So it's, who do I need? Well, the orientation is, where do I find X? So simplest thing is, where do I go for my lunch? Where are the toilets? Where are the emergency exits? It's all of that sort of stuff. What are the policies that I need to adhere to? So that there's the kind of hygiene stuff, if you like. And then there's the, what do I need to know in order to do my job? And then there's the, who do I need to know in order to do my job? And obviously, an AI might be able to help you navigate some of that stuff. It can also act as, with the right knowledge base behind it, any question that you have, it can answer. So, if you've got a question on the policy, it can answer what that policy is, or it could even prompt you to kind of go and read up on a particular part of a policy. And I think, this is probably moving a little bit further into the future, but if you could, for example, have an AI mentor for the first 3 or 4 months, or even just permanently when you're in an organization, which is checking what you're doing and making sure you're adhering to policies and making sure that, the relevant stakeholders who need to review something can review it or have reviewed it. So I think things like that, where I could see AI having a real, it's almost like an ongoing contribution to ensuring that you're maximizing the value to the organization and that the organization delivers back to you. And I think that would generally lead to a much better employee experience.
Yeah, and we do quite often see kind of on that point, companies introduce kind of like a buddy system. So if you've just been hired, you're assigned a buddy, and that's the person you can ask all the stupid questions to without being scared. And I think this is the point that we've made in the past as well about AI mentors. It's this always on ability to ask stupid questions. And I can remember this quite a long time ago now, but very early in my career, I was basically part of a one-man team and working with a CFO. And at the start, I was terrified of asking the stupid questions because the person that I needed to ask was the CFO, quite a big organization. So yeah, I would have absolutely loved an AI mentor to at least screen the questions beforehand.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's, from a social and human perspective, there is a downside to that, which is that you could end up in an organization where you actually haven't met anyone and you haven't created the human connections. And certainly one of the things that they've showed through COVID, actually, where they did research on, retention, and I can't remember who it was, but they were looking at what the retention rates are for people who have spent time with their colleagues versus those that didn't. And the specific example was there was a company that was doing away days where they would get everyone together every 6 months, but have a really structured, there was a real purpose to why they were going away together. And they found that when they didn't do that, the retention rates skyrocketed. And when they did, it dropped the retention rates. I think it was about 30% difference in retention rate. And that's because people want to feel connected to other people. And the more opportunities you give them to do that, the more likely that you are to retain them. So I think it's almost like there's a limit. You need your mentor AI to say, oh, for God's sake, go and speak to somebody stop hassling me, and then you might actually get a longer term or better retention of your employees if you do that.
So my AI imaginary friend isn't a good thing.
I think together with a human real friend.
Yeah, as long as your AI imaginary friend every now and again hassles you to talk to your real friends, then I think you're fine. Good. Well, that's been a really interesting look through recruitment end to end, and I think we've covered most of the aspects, certainly, of recruitment. I think for me, the things I take away from this are that recruitment has already been impacted quite a lot by AI and is using it to a greater or lesser extent. I think, there is definitely a difference between the organizations that have embraced tech and the ones that haven't. I think there's some real opportunities for generative AI within recruitment, but it feels like it's, at least for now, more around the edges than right in the middle. But the things that it will have a big impact on are things like the candidate experience and the time that the HR teams and the hiring teams need to produce stuff. So I think, yeah, really interesting area to look at, and we will look with interest to see how it develops over the next few months and years. So that's it for this time. I've been Giles.
I've been Graham, and if you want to talk to us about this or any other subject we talk about, do email us on ai@insightflow.io. That's ai@insightflow.io.
And I've been Rich.